Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I'm your host. My name's James Azer. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Today, I've got a very, very special guest, someone who I've given a shout out to before, actually on the podcast with Manny Brazilai. We gave him a little shout out. Alex Tan is with us today. Hey Alex, how's it going?
Very good, very good.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know Alex is, in my book, the ultimate CISO. And I say that because for very simple reasons. He's an international man. He's done it across multiple industries for so many years, from the consulting piece to entertainment to you name it. I mean, you look up the dude and you just go, huh, interesting. Time Warner, Global Payments, EY. I don't know. That's a very impressive resume, and you've worked all over the world as well, right,
Yes,
Alex?
that's right.
So, and Alex is Atlanta-based now, and he's a chief information security officer and counter-threat intelligence for a big manufacturing firm who we will keep anonymous for the sake of today's podcast. And we thank you for understanding that piece of it. But you are wearing "Make Cyber Great Again" hat. So if you guys are, you guys should go to the video. He is supporting, because you did miss the summit. I mean, these were the hats that were given at the summit to the people who participated in the tabletop.
With much regret, yes.
But you were with us the night before for dinner, which was off the hook. It was a good dinner. It was fun.
It was nice meeting Manny there. Was chatting with him for 45 minutes, and he's a brilliant guy.
He is. He has a different way of thinking about cyber.
Yeah.
Very different way of thinking about cyber. I think a lot of times when you hear people talk, it's always the same message, right? Just maybe using a different word or a different slogan, but it's the same message being repeated. Whenever I talk to Manny, I get the idea that he's talking about stuff that no one else is really talking about. And to me, that's the most impressive piece of it. Is he's just a little brilliant mind. Corinne's in Israel right now, and she actually had lunch with Manny. When was it? When did she send us the picture? Yesterday?
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday she had lunch with Manny, and she was like, "You don't believe all these different things that he was telling me," and I'm like, "Oh man." So if Manny's listening, you should tag him on the intro to this so he knows, and that way we get Manny to hear all the accolades that people have towards him, because he's so humble. This does nothing to him. Some people, you compliment them and the ego just goes, not many. But Alex, so I've kind of given a good I want to say a really simple overview of your background, but why don't you take our listeners through your career journey of how you became a chief information security officer, because it's an interesting story.
Sure. So I'm from Malaysia, and I did my college degree in Australia. So I'm a CPA. I have an accounting degree. And I did some subjects in IT, but I never had a minor in IT. But when I came out, prior to me getting my first job, I did 6 months of intern as a financial auditor. And I realized in those 6 months, that's not what I want to do. It's too boring for me. So when I came out, the first job I got was as an IT auditor of a bank, and with an internal audit department. So that's where I got my career started in IT. And I did a lot of white collar crime investigations. It was a bank, so things like PIN fraud, where we caught a data center guy was selling PIN numbers to syndicates for $100 each card PIN.
You mean this was before the dark web?
Yeah, this was in the 1990s, right?
Yeah, this was when
There was no hacking going on.
Or it was corporate espionage. It was
all between Russia, US, and China then, right? But this is corporate. Did some embezzlement investigations where they got me in the car with the lawyers and guard with a shotgun. And in Malaysia, you're not allowed to have guns. And I was sitting next to the guard with a shotgun, and I wasn't told where I was going, but we were heading towards an employee's house with a search warrant to search his house. for evidence of embezzlement. So that was kind of fun.
But laws are different in Malaysia than they are in the U.S. I mean, it is. Employees there, the employment laws in Malaysia are different from the U.S., period, and that kind of stuff.
Right. I mean, they deal with white collar crime a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the investigations are still very manual, I guess. It's not so sophisticated then. I'm sure that's changed now. So I did that. I had a lot of mergers and acquisition tasks where the company would buy a company in Fiji Islands and they would fly me there for 6 months doing due diligence on IT security of their systems. So that was a great experience. But then the SAP world came on, and I joined a multinational firm, a tobacco company that was really into SAP ERP system implementations, and that's when I got my my international exposure. We sent me to UK for about 2 months just to learn about SAP security. Came back, was part of the SAP implementation project, then became IT project manager for Y2K, and then did SAP project mergers between two companies. So I got to see a lot of things on the ERP side.
I'm going to cut you off there for a second.
Sure.
Biggest breach we've heard of, the Marriott Starwood. You and I were talking about it before we went live, and you said you didn't know much about it. But here you are, you're talking about something you probably did in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. You were doing IT security due diligence for mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
Do you feel like Marriott and Starwood dropped the ball there, or do you feel like this was something, do you feel like maybe the hack was so sophisticated that they weren't able to really recognize it?
Well, if you do a lot of studies on the breaches that happen, some of it were caused by mergers and acquisitions. Companies buy companies, and as they merge them into their network, security is an afterthought. So when you announce that you're going to buy company A, what a lot of the nation's state hackers do or cyber espionage do is that, hey, there's a chance for us to get in there through this company. So let's go hack this company that you're buying. That takes 6 months to a year process, right? And in the meantime, I could infiltrate the company, be on the network. When you merge, I now have an access pathway to your network, which would be much harder if not for that company that you just bought. So, that's just one of the attack vectors that you see out there. I think Anthem was one of those victims.
Well, there's an interesting piece about Starwood and Marriott was that Starwood reported a breach right before the merger began. They just said, hey, we had 100,000 file, customer data compromised, and they said they treated it and got it out. And now in retrospect, you look at it, and again, I'm not advocating, and I'm not saying they're to blame. There's a lot of chatter out there that, merger and acquisition, cyber due diligence has to be better, has to be more important, has to be whatever. But it's just interesting to hear you say, hey, I was doing it in 2000.
Right.
Right. So,
well, it's in the 1990s then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the focus was more about it's the reports of the data, the financial data is right. It's the inventory system showing the right records of inventory, because that's money, that's value that they're paying for. I think that's the part where we kind of focus on back in the 1990s.
So where did your path take you from tobacco?
Right. So from the tobacco, I kind of moved into the .com world where I was managing the IT ops for a while of a supposedly first ERP system that was online. You don't have to go implement systems on your network. You just subscribe. It's a subscribing model, and you have an ERP through your browser. Of course, when the .com crashed, and I wanted to move to China because China was exploding. But I don't speak Mandarin. It wasn't a requirement to speak Mandarin, but the company I was talking to said that, hey, why don't you come to Germany to work for us? And they offered me a job for SAP FICO team leader, but that wasn't what I wanted. In the end, they got me to land in Kennesaw, Georgia, as an IT auditor for their internal audit department. And that was a special job that was 2001. Um, and my main focus for that job was not doing IT audits, was to breach systems. So here you have a German multinational internal audit department who's having employees in that department breaching systems in the company. Pen testing, they call it. They sent me all around the world to breach the systems, Singapore, US, in Germany. And that was a good experience for me. I had a very good, I want to say, 60-year-old mentor. His name is Martin Lemaire. He taught me all about hacking. He's a German guy. And through him, I learned a lot about breaching systems. And the sad part is back in the 2001, 2002, there's not a lot of security solutions out there to stop you from breaching. In typical environment, you will have AV, IPS, firewall, patch management. That's about it. But I'm not a good hacker, and I could breach a network in days. I would own the domain admin credential in days. I would own the entire network and the thousands of users' passwords. I would crack them in 5 days. And that's the same result you get by going to different countries. It was kind of boring after a while. I was doing it for 2.5 years, and I came to a stage where I said, I need to do something else, right? And then I'd kind of move on to E&Y, doing SAP post-implementation review, doing SOCs, doing IT audits, but then kind of joined a credit card payment processor here in Atlanta, Global Payments, as their IT audit director. And that's when I kind of use all the skills that I have to kind of hope to prevent a breach at the company like that. And I spent 8 years there. And, I kind of left Global Payments, did 2 years of cybersecurity consulting, and helped a lot of SMBs trying to protect their data and their network. Joined Time Warner, doing a NIST cybersecurity assessment for them, which is at Turner Broadcasting, CNN. Came up with a 5-year roadmap, and then I'm joined this manufacturing company and just trying to do the same thing as well.
It's it's interesting because when you look at your career path, it started from a completely different, had nothing to do with security, but it had to do with fraud. And what's very interesting is that's the kind of mindset that you need to have in cybersecurity. Because I think most of the time when you meet people who studied cyber and or did IT, they don't ever think the way they're going to get it. They're unable to really hinge or fathom or imagine the way that they're going to get attacked. So they typically go through a traditional framework and they're going through the checklist. But when you come with a background like yours, you're able to think what the bad guy's going to look at. Where's he going to go first?
Right.
And then you build it that way, which is, I think, the right way to build a security plan for an organization is you got to think how the bad guys are going to come at you.
Right. So, I mean, if you gone through the experience like I did, is I breach systems, I am the hacker, and then you go into the defense mode. I'm an auditor. I flag all those issues that you need to go fix, and then I help company defend the network. I'm the blue team. I'm the CISO. I'm the security SOC operations center. You get to see at all facets of this whole cybersecurity industry, and you learn from it.
You started kind of mentioning something early on, which is, security is always an afterthought. It's like people look at security and compliance as one, but then, it's more about the compliance and checking the box than it is about actually securing overall. It's something that a lot of chief information security officers tackle. A lot of organizations, people who are in IT security and organizations go through this process trying to explain that just because we're compliant doesn't mean we're secure. How do you address that mindset? What are some of the best practices you've used in your career to kind of help people adapt a different mindset?
So these are my personal views, right? And it's nothing to do with the companies I work for or the companies I've worked or been to before. I feel like security should come first and compliance comes second. And not a lot of companies can do that. In a heavily regulated industry, they cannot afford to do it. They have to do both. And you look at all my peers in those industries, you look at the budget and the FTE they have, 60 to 70% is on compliance, 30%, 40% is on security. So you can see where the focus and the shift is. But when you breach, you're not compliant. So you spend all the money trying to be compliant, but when you breach, you're not compliant. So what's the point? I think if you're in the SMB side and you're not regulated, you have the opportunity to say, let's do security first and compliance second.
Right.
And what that means is that you try to be good at security, which means anti-malware, anti-phishing, anti-command and control. You reduce the attack vector, then you focus on compliance. And I feel like if you use that approach, half the battle is won. In fact, I was talking to the Mandan folks, and when I tell them, hey, our strategy is security first, compliance second, and they said, if you do that, half the battle is won. But not a lot of the board of directors would agree with that.
Well, I think boards lack education and understanding that a board is designed to kind of look at the company from an overall standpoint rather than a security standpoint.
Right.
You have the audit committee within the board. So if you have a good audit committee, they can typically deliver a message to the board that's far more impacting than when you report to the board or anyone else does.
Right. And if you look at Manny and what he said in one of his seminars, he talked about threats, right?
Uh-huh.
Why is it when you have a lion in the room, everyone reacts to it like with immediate urgency? And when you look at hackers on your network, they don't. It's a mindset, is what you're seeing.
Well, it's acceptable risk, right? I mean, we're doing this project that we're releasing next month on JP Morgan Chase, the breach that JP Morgan Chase went through. Right. It's kind of like an in-depth study of the breach. And when you look at what the hackers took from that breach, it was no account information, no social security numbers, no credit card information. They took the most basic of data: name, phone number, email address. Would that bug you?
Yeah.
In a pre-GDPR world, if someone accessed your database and took name, phone number, and email address, you'd be like, it's not critical data that was compromised. No social security numbers, no account numbers. So you go, we dodged a bullet.
Right.
I won't give the spoiler end to this because I want people to listen to what we're working on. But there's a spoiler to that with what people are able to do with just very basic data.
Yeah, it does. It's all about intelligence about the people, the users, and what you can derive from them. And once you get the data, it's lost, right?
Yeah,
you already have that.
I mean,
you can protect the data, you can pull it back, but you derived the information from the data.
Once your data's gone, why would you go get it again? Right? I mean, I feel like whenever I've heard that story, someone took our data and we went after the hackers to get our data back. And I'm like, this isn't kidnapping. This isn't someone taking your kid and you got to go get your kid back. This is murder. Yeah. Once your data's out there, it's gone. That's it. It's done. It's been compromised. Whether you get it back or not, there've already been 500 copies done of it, and it's in 500 other places.
Right.
You're not going to be able to retrieve all of it.
Right.
I mean, you're wasting resources doing something that, to me personally, and I'm speaking from a personal standpoint, whenever I hear people tell me that, I go, really? You went after your data after someone took it? He goes, well, I needed to get it back. I'm like, for who? It's gone.
Now I have to say that from a security first, compliance second, I mean, if you are a company that has the budget and the resources to do both, by all means, yes. But if you don't, and a lot of SMBs don't, a lot of those companies with $300 million to $1 billion, they don't have that kind of budget. And you have to focus, and I would just recommend security first, compliance second.
We're talking, it's Friday, December 28th, the year's almost over. Literally, there's 3 more days for this year, and we embark on 2019. I think 2018 for in terms of security, I felt like 2016, 17 were much worse than 2018.
Yes.
But then people always try to correct me. They go, well, what about the Marriott breach? You keep forgetting the Marriott breach. And I go, to me, the Marriott breach was the epitome of hacking a global organization. And I think those kind of organizations like Marriott that they have, I think, what is it, 15 or 16 global CISOs for different regions that they operate in. I mean, it's not just one person. It's a lot of different individuals. I think that scalability of trying to secure an organization that has its own hotels, then franchise hotels, then names like hotels that actually use the Marriott name but aren't managed by Marriott. Like, I think it's almost impossible to manage that kind of security. I don't think there's a blueprint for it.
Yeah, it's not easy. But, like Jeff said on your podcast that with the passport numbers, and you could see people traveling not only in the locations they go to, but the reason why they're there, the groups they're with, right? They can derive a lot of information on that.
Well, I mean, part of why airlines, no one wants to take down a plane, but people want to know who's on the plane. That's more interesting than actually hacking the plane, is who's on that flight manifest and where are they going and where were they before.
Yeah.
That's the more interesting data piece. What do you see 2019 looking like for the state of cybersecurity?
Well, the state of cybersecurity is a sad one, and let me try to explain that in my world. If you look in the 1990s, when we're doing SAP ERP implementation, right? Just take 10 years before that. What do we have? We have AS400 servers,
Right.
with sales systems. We have another AS400 servers with purchase order systems. We have another one called inventory systems. They're all sitting on a standalone systems. They're not integrated. They're not talking to each other. They hire developers to build those interfaces. And that takes like 5 years to fulfill that kind of plan. Then came SAP. And SAP was great because now you can buy all the modules. It's all integrated. It's the people that you use to implement them, they're all trained. In fact, you even have a methodology for implementing SAP. It's called a SAP,
Right.
accelerated SAP methodology, right? And I was part of that group. We implemented SAP in 8 months, and they assign the team leaders of those modules, train them prior to the implementation, create all the support group, then you implement in 8 months, and then the consultants laugh and we're good. Cybersecurity is in the state where prior to SAP, we do not have an enterprise security planning system, or you call it ESP. We do not have one. It's all standalone. They're not integrated. And the way we've tried to integrate it is through people, which is then caused a shortage of talent. And we all know during the SAP time or pre-SAP time, it doesn't work. People don't work to do the interface. Even if you build scripts to do it, it doesn't work well. So we just need that. So it's called like a moonshot. Moonshot number one is that we need an enterprise security planning system. And I think Cisco is kind of getting to it. They've been buying companies up and they're building this integrated system, but they're not there. And they can't do it all, right?
Do you feel like that's a vendor, do you feel like it's people not listening to what the industry needs and just coming up with different things? Or do you feel like no one has the money and the capabilities to really pull this off? I mean, Cisco's big.
They have a $4 billion cash. They can do it. It's just that execution and the strategy.
Google and Microsoft are trying to get into cyber game as well. They're scooping up companies right and left. AT&T just scooped up Alien Volt to do kind of a...
Right. So if you fast forward 10, 20 years, right, you're going to have like the likes of SAP, Oracle, EBS, JD Edwards, right? So fast forward 10, 20 years, you're going to have like probably 3 to 5 integrated security systems that you can buy. and you have to choose. And that's my vision of what's going to be
You
coming
feel
down
like
the pipeline.
you feel like it's just going to consolidate to become kind of like a cable company. Like you've got three choices: DirecTV, Dish,
Well,
Comcast, and then
yeah, I mean, you look at the benefits of it though. If you need to implement an enterprise security planning, you need a budget, you need a stakeholder, you need a sponsor. It's millions of dollars, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need the people, and there goes the waste that can happen, the missteps that can happen in implementing a cybersecurity roadmap. That you don't have the people, you don't have the budget. If you have an ESP, you would have solved all that.
devil's advocate though. Do you want to put all your security on one vendor?
Well,
Because that's the flip side of it, right? If today I use company X and company X, tomorrow I get breached, and it's because company X's product either it wasn't fully implemented, but there's always someone to blame for a breach, and typically you're going to try to blame the technology provider first before you take responsibility yourself, because you're trying to save. And sometimes that's a real reason, and sometimes it's a victim of implementation.
right. So back to the analogy of SAP, even though you implement SAP doesn't mean you cannot go and buy a third-party solution for another add-on till SAP comes up with it, right? So there was never a BI,
Right,
business intelligence.
But then you're essentially asking a new company to integrate into your SAP solution.
Yes.
So you're talking about APIs, which essentially
APIs.
open, which we all know that APIs aren't exactly known for being airtight secure.
Terrible security. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I get what you're saying. It's a great idea. I think it still needs to be kind of perfected in a manner where organizations. I agree with you. I mean, when you look at a chief information security officer's job, it's not easy. And when you work for a manufacturing company, I've spoken to people who are in development, in dev, and they have 500 people that work in DevOps, developing different apps and programs for an organization. Well, you got to address security at the core of that foundation. You got to start when you're developing an app. Security shouldn't be, hey, we developed an app, now let's secure it. It should be like, what's the app? What's the purpose of it? Where is it communicating? What kind of data is it giving or taking? And then how do we start to secure that data from birth?
Right. So then you go down to the second moonshot, right?
Right.
One's a tech stack. Now the second is the reporting structure. My view is that CISO at a lower level that reports to IT or to a COO is not going to be successful. And
I agree with that.
yeah, I mean, you look at Allen Booth Hamilton. They are probably the first company I've seen on media that has the CISO sitting on top of a CIO. Right.
Right, and he's reporting directly to the CEO.
Right.
Right.
So you gotta have a CISO reporting to the CEO, because
that was part of their bid to win the $1 billion in cybersecurity DoD contracts they won earlier this year.
they had to do it, right?
They had
And it makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
If you think about a CISO's role, is you're going battle with foreign hackers or local hackers, whatever we want to call it. We're doing the battle every day. And when you do a battle for the company, the CEO of the company should have the CISO reporting to him or her, because he or she needs all the support that he needs to have.
What would you
to
tell
win that battle.
what would you tell a CEO if you were consulting for a company today and you were sitting with a CEO in the room? Why would he want to take that risk? Because there is risk with having the CISO report directly to the CEO. Because if the CISO tells you CEO something and you say no, and then something happens, now you're liable.
Right.
And a lot of the time, the reason there's that middle person in some organization is because that's the buffer for liability.
Right. So when you have a breach, the first thing they do is they fire the CISO, right? Or the CIO. So
in most cases, unfortunately, yes.
So the jokes I've heard going to all the conferences is the CISO is the chief internal scapegoat officer, and the CIO is the chief interruption officer. So both have their nicknames. But, when you go through a breach, war has been declared. You as a CEO needs all boots on the ground. You need a general to help you fight this battle. And when you fire a CISO, you're firing your general. He knows all the skeletons in the closet. He knows where all the holes are that he couldn't have time and the budget and the resources and the support to go fix it. And you just fired the person that knows all this. That's a wrong move in my view. But, I understand corporate America, there's liabilities, and that's why you fired them because of liability issues. But if I were the CEO, I would have the CISO report to me and work through to prevent a breach. And if I go through a breach, I still want that person to be near me because I need to go do the battle.
Well, it's like firing. You make a very valid point, which is you don't, when you're in the middle of a situation, you don't want to get rid of the one person who knows what, is going on.
Right.
I think a lot of times you see that be media pressure and stockholder pressure on organizations to take an immediate action to try to correct something to increase investor confidence.
Right.
Which I feel like what increases investor confidence is we're going to keep this team on board. We're going to review after we get over it, and then we'll make decisions based on that.
Right. The witch hunt still happens, right? So
the witch hunt's always going to happen.
Once you got breached, you go through remediation. After a year, say, all right, so who do we get to blame for this? So the witch hunt still happens. But, me being the CEO of a company, I would not do that.
You brought up a very interesting point, which is a lot of CISOs don't have the money, the budget, or the people. How do you deal with the shortage of people?
Well, it's kind of it's a very tough world there out there because you're looking for talent, you can't find talent, and once you find them, you keep them, and they'll jump ship every year or 2 years
because they get more money somewhere else.
And I've just heard a CISO telling one to the other, says like, why would I train a person on threat hunting? Because after a year or two, I know he's going to go over to your shop, right? So why would I want to spend that money and train him or her for you? So those are the kind of environment that you're in. But my solution to talent shortage and issue is that if you have the CISO sitting on top of infrastructure and network guys, right, still reporting to the CIO, for example, he then, by virtue of that reporting structure, now have a whole team of cybersecurity team members to help him the cause, right? I don't need to go hire people because I have domain administrators, I have application administrators, I will have firewall administrators.
Well, you're talking about letting security kind of run within each team, having a security champion within each team, creating a champion program almost.
Well, the real life scenario out there for a CISO is that whenever they try to do something, they get roadblocked by infrastructure network folks, the CIO, the business, you name it, they get roadblocked.
Well, there's challenges because they have a deadline to launch something for business reasons. I mean, that was one of the shortfalls in the Equifax, the congressional report of Equifax, is they were launching and buying companies and just trying to meet deadlines. Security became like not last on the list. It wasn't even on the list.
If you look at all the breaches and you talk to all the CISOs, there's one message that comes out. Well, we discussed that segment of the business before, and we said, no, that's not advisable. Guess what? They got overridden. It was a business solution. Even if you go to talk about the cost of breaches, it was IT. Well, we talk about that, but IT says, no, we do not want to disrupt the business. We're not going to do that. Thereby, we accept the risk, right? If you have a CISO sitting in front of a CIO reporting to a CEO, I think you could sidestep some of those costs. You could limit the number of breaches that you may have. That's my view.
You were talking about CISO being the first to go when there's a breach, and there's some breaches where, in fact, we're now 2-3 years later, and the CISO is still in his position with some organizations, right? I think a lot of people always look at Equifax and go, the CEO, CIO, and CISO left. But I think now when you look at the 98-page, and I don't know, have you seen the 98-page congressional report?
I did.
You kind of look at that and you understand why all three had to go. Because essentially the CISO and CIO gave in, they caved to their responsibilities and their liabilities for the business case, rather than trying to build amends within the system to correct some of the business needs that were there. Now that I see the full congressional report and I've spoken to people within Equifax, I think that was the right decision at the time, no matter what. But I've seen other organizations. I mean, we didn't see Marriott fired or CISO yet.
Well, you could still do all that a year after a breach, right? You could still do all the remediation with the folks, but after doing all the investigation, you could still say, well, we have to.
I
do
mean,
something.
are we talking general or are we talking Equifax?
We're talking in general, yeah.
Because I think a lot of times I hear a lot of CISOs talk about the Equifax thing, right? And they use the Equifax example in this case, but there are other breaches that have happened where the team remained the same until today. I mean, you're 3-4 years post breach, even though there were people to blame, they set a correction course and they're more measured, and the board was able to adapt to it and the business was able to adapt to it. And because of that, I think now the company's more secure.
Right. And how much did Equifax spend on the remediation? $400+ million.
They spend a lot of money.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that Equifax was just, in terms of breaches, it was a very big breach because it was a credit reporting agency that had so much information on people. Number one. Number two, they waited so long to report it. So that looked bad already. Number three, they had some of their executives doing insider trading on stock when they figured it out. So, I mean, overall, number four, I don't know who they hired to do their PR, but my God, that was a terrible job of communicating something. Number five, people are still hacking you, and people are out there testing you. And then your South American arm, your password to your domain admin was admin. I mean, come on. It was a set of negligence on that end with Equifax. Doesn't mean that they weren't victims of a crime. I'm just saying that in that specific scenario, when I hear chief information security officers talk about it, and it was a discussion that I had yesterday with someone, I tell them, I go, listen, read the report now. And you can actually say they deserve to go because they didn't do their job, period.
Right. You could argue that they deserve to go, but it doesn't have to be on the spot immediately, right?
You can argue timing. I think when you look at all the pieces that were going on with Equifax at the time, I think if you kept them, it would have been worse. Like in retrospect, think about it. 16 months later.
Well, the goal is not to be in the breach, right?
Right. The goal is never to be there, but you're gonna be there. So.
But in order to not be in the breach, the CISO cannot be buried under the CIO. The CISO cannot be not reporting to the CEO. I think the lesson here is not to say, hey, who's to blame and what caused and all that, but I think you need to look at the structure and say, can you as a CEO of a company now afford to not have the CISO not reporting to you? You can't, because companies are being breached. And why are they being breached? It's a failure of IT, it's a failure of the business, not taking into consideration of security. It's an afterthought. If you can change the culture, the mindset, I think you have a chance to beat this threat that you have.
I think there's when we talked about the state of security, right, and we looked at some of the recent breaches in 2018, and then we looked at some of the stuff that happened before in 2016, 2017, and so forth. You kind of look at, I think, OPM. That was a big breach.
Yes.
I think that breach had far more impact than Equifax.
Huge impact.
Right. To me, JP Morgan Chase was a brilliant breach because it showed what hackers can do with information. Again, I'm not going to give it away here. People are going to have to listen to the series we're doing on the JP Morgan Chase breach. But when you listen to that, you will realize, and I think we've made it in a way where it actually communicates not just to the CISOs, but it communicates to the CIO, CEO, COO, CFO, CTO of a company and a board. Because I kind of break it down and we go down a really like simple road, I want to say, which is any information is bad. But what happens when people take information and do something with it right away? Right? Because Equifax, I mean, OPM, it's the first arrest now. They just literally, like a few months ago, arrested the first people who were part of the OPM breach, which was 5 years ago. That's going to continue. I think that's going to continue to kind of Equifax. We know it was a nation state, but we haven't seen anyone really try to manipulate and use that data yet. So your data was compromised, but it's a war of attrition, right? Hackers have that information. I personally think that no one's dumb enough to use it in the U.S. I think in a global marketplace, if you're able to forge a passport and go to a country like Indonesia and open a bunch of bank accounts and open a bunch of companies and take a bunch of loans and launder, I don't think the U.S. economy is going to suffer from it. I think individuals within the U.S. will suffer internationally because of it. Because the U.S. passport has more weight, and U.S. Social Security numbers and U.S. personnel have more weight in foreign nations than they do here locally.
Okay.
That's my personal thing at Equifax is we'll never see it really hit the U.S. We won't, because there's so many safeguards in place right now that companies that even lend money today, they do such a thorough verification process because they don't want to fall victims for it, because they realize they're going to have to eat it. And insurance companies are requiring some companies to increase their fraudability and go through a thorough due diligence on people they're giving money to. But internationally, I mean, you can open a bank account online internationally as an American. You can open a company through an agent, having never set foot in a country. You can lend money from a bank, having never set foot in a country, by showing a business plan. I think that's the threat of Equifax.
That, and a lot of companies haven't come back with countermeasures on, if you assume social security numbers is exposed, if you assume your date of birth, your home address, and your last 5 home address is exposed, what do we have to change to validate who you are, right? I don't think a lot of companies have got to that stage.
Well, I think people are waiting for the government to lead that. And in case if you're listening and you haven't heard the news, our government is shut down at the moment.
Well,
so they're not exactly working on that solution.
Just 2 days ago, I was trying to log into my Capital One account, and I can't because I don't have the password, right? So I lost my password. Social security numbers, your last name, date of birth. Sends it to my email, of course. So my email is my last defense, which is not the greatest thing because I know email can be compromised pretty easily.
So what would you do different? Biometrics?
Well, tax is not the way, all right, because we know tax is no longer secure. So I think companies need to come up, especially those in the consumer side, they need to come up with fraud detection systems where they can tie endpoints to a user, right? Not IP addresses, because you can spoof that, but MAC addresses and things like that.
What about biometrics?
Biometrics can be stolen, and once it's stolen, it's gone for good. How do you counter a stolen thumbprint? You can't change your thumbprint. How do you
What about facial
counter
ID?
facial ID stolen? You cannot counter
Well,
facial ID.
Well, I mean, facial ID, so in some countries, there's these softwares that the way it works is they, when you're land and you're going through customs, they take your photo and it generates a facial DNA.
Right.
And then that facial DNA is how they track your movement in that country.
And yeah,
And so
China does that pretty well.
China does that real well. I mean, they have a file on every single citizen. I mean, they know where you went, how long you were in the place, when you left,
Right.
and if you were wearing different clothes. I mean, Turkey does it very well as well.
Well, didn't you see the news that you can bypass facial now by doing a 3D mask of a picture of a person, and now use that 3D mask like Mission Impossible? Here, I now can log into your phone with that mask.
I think, but that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, though. I mean, when you think of what am I doing it for? that's a lot of work. Unless you're able to produce 3D masks and put them onto someone who's because one of the things with facial DNA that I understand is it's measuring different aspects of and ratios within your face. So you would need to get someone with a very similar facial structure to put a mask on them, because guess what? If the person's eye color is blue and you're brown, then that facial DNA fails every time. Right? If the distance between this nostril to this nostril isn't identical, or if the angle of your nose isn't identical, then you fail that. That becomes an anomaly. That's like a partial print, which then takes it down to the level of, all right, let's investigate why this is the case. So that's fraud detection. I mean, I'm a very big proponent of facial biometrics and facial DNA because I think it's hard work for hackers, for people who want to use that data. It's hard work to do it. So who are you going to do it for and on? On people that's worth it, right? Because if you're going to go and invest $50,000 in creating a 3D facial mask of someone, because that's the cost of creating a good facial 3D mask of someone, you're not going to do it on someone who has shitty credit. You're going to do it on a CEO of a company, but then that CEO of a company can have safeguards in place on specific pieces of his data. And it's easier to define that population and protect that population, no different than how we protect the president.
Well, James, the SMBs are not going down to facial recognition biometrics. They don't have that kind of appetite nor the talent to do it.
Our phones do it already.
Right.
Apple does it. Google does it. Samsung does it.
Yes, but none of the corporate systems does it.
Well, when you get hired to a job, right? I mean, I haven't worked in a corporation now since 2008. But when I worked for Verizon Wireless, I had a key card with my picture on it. They took my picture, right? Because my key card said James Azar and it had my picture on it, right? So, I mean, companies are already using that to create ID cards for their employees. And the software already exists. Apple has it. Google has it. It's just a matter of them allowing companies to lease it, to use it, and then the government really taking it over as Atlanta Hartfield. Are you flying internationally anytime soon?
No.
If you fly internationally with Delta out of Atlanta Hartfield Jackson now, you don't even have to show your passport. It's all biometrics. TSA is biometrics, check-in is biometrics, and boarding the flight is biometrics.
Right.
It is the coolest thing. And if this is the test. So, I mean, if you're able to do it on a passport to board a flight, you want to tell me we can't do it to manage someone's identity instead of a social security number? Because any number you create, any identity you create, if it's stored somewhere, someone's going to go after it.
As a CISO of a company, I haven't seen that kind of technology out there that we could buy and implement for corporate systems. I've not seen it. And, you talk about MFA. MFA has been around for, 10 years?
But MFA isn't secure.
And it's not. And you tried to implement that for the C-level folks. It's not easy. So, again, the CISO needs to be reporting to CEO to sidestep all those roadblocks.
My American Express app, just so you know, on my iPhone, it uses, I don't have to enter my password. It uses my facial recognition built into the iPhone to open the app. So when I open the app, when I hit the home screen, it'll look at my face and then it'll go, okay, you're James. Here you go. Log into your Amex account.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I find that if apps on phones are able to do that, we should be able to find a way to take advantage of it because the technology is already out there. Companies are already using it, and everything's going on your smartphones anyways. Every laptop and every computer today has a camera in it. So the question is, can we do something like that? I mean, you bring up a good point with the 3D printing a face, but I think it costs so much money to do that, and you got to have no face is identical. There's always, it's like your thumbprint. Right? No two thumbprints are the same. Well, no two faces are the same. Even identical twins have different things in their face. It's just they're like very minor. I don't know. I mean,
No, I think that's the future, right? The future is going to be facial recognition, but You just have to wait for the adoption to be at a higher rate, but right now it's not. And
I think the problem is companies, the big ones that you were talking about, the S&Ps, they're kind of waiting for the government to come up with something. And I keep trying to tell people I talk to, I go, if you keep waiting for government, the government didn't invent airplanes. The Wright brothers did. Government didn't bring cars. Ford did. If you keep waiting for government to change or revolutionize something, guess what? It's never going to happen.
well, true to this point that if you rely on government says you have to be compliant with NIST, with HIPAA, and all that. That's your minimum requirement for security. It's more than that for cybersecurity. It's more than compliance to be secure, to prevent a breach. So yeah, by all means, you shouldn't wait for government to tell you what to do.
No, never. IoT devices. You and I were talking about that also before we started recording. A lot of different IoT devices. What is it, like the numbers? I see different numbers, but I think it's like 20 billion, right, Micah? 20 billion IoT devices by 2020 or 23 billion? What is it?
20 billion from what last
20 billion? 20 billion IoT devices by 2020. No, it's stock in security. Companies are implementing it into their organizations without even thinking of securing these IoT devices.
Yeah.
I love an Alexa at the office of a CEO. I've been in offices of CEOs where they had an Alexa on their desk or like a Google Home, like one of those. And I'm like, oh, please tell me. Well, you didn't change the password, did you? It's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, isn't it?
And it's recording every conversation
Yep.
online.
And then all of a sudden Amazon's like, hey, are you looking to buy Intel? We've got Intel on Prime for 2-day shipping right now. It's only $40 billion.
That's funny. Yes, well, the IoT, there's a reason why they roll it out with no security. One is they can't because it's too small. They can't put, there's not enough CPU, not enough memory space, not enough space in general to put security, and that's why they roll it out. And that's the sad part, right? They roll it out with no security. They get pawned, they get owned, they use for a lot of malicious activities, and then it's an afterthought. But now they have a platform for IoTs to be secure, and I think AWS IoT is one of those platforms. I was at a conference, and they had the whole security stack of an IoT platform for any companies who want to roll out IoTs. It's from encryption device to the back engine, to password security, to encryption, to over-the-air patching, right? But, would the company do it? Would the company invest in such a platform for security for their IoT? And I don't think a lot of companies have that choice.
What's the business case to do it?
Well, the business case is that someone's going to prove you that your IoT is not secure, and by virtue of that, your brand damage occurs, your sales takes a hit. You could almost argue that that may generate more sales because now they have to buy a more secure IoT, and guess what? Our version number 10 has all the security. Why don't you buy that?
In intelligence, there's a saying that goes, I'll go where the guy just blew himself up because that's the safest place to be. Right? So, like, to me, if I hear a company got breached, I stayed at a Marriott last night. Kid you not? Stayed at a Marriott last night. They just got breached. They're not going to get breached again. I stayed at a Marriott last night.
James, it takes a long time to remediate a breach.
I know. I know, but but they're remediating the past, but they're fixing up the present. But the safest place to be is at a Marriott now. I'm afraid to stay at an IHG.
Well, you could be right because all the foreign state hackers says, well, I'm not going to touch Marriott now because it's all going to be filled with forensic investigators, so I'm going to stay away from it.
I'm staying away from it.
It's probably the safest place.
I'm not going to Marriott. I'm going to go to IHG. I'm going to go to Hilton. I'm going to go to those guys, so I'm not staying there. I just changed all my credit cards because of the Marriott breach. I'm not trying to do it again.
That's a good point.
You know, I mean, that's where people go. I mean, you bring up a good point, which is, you know, the brain damage of an IoT thing, right? Again, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Target really didn't lose a lot of money based on their breach. I mean, sales went down a little bit. They lost some market cap. It was mostly investor, but no lady said, "Oh, I'm done with Target now. I'm going to Walmart. I'm gonna go shop at Kmart. I'm not shopping at Target because they got breached." The consumers don't care.
Well, they care for a while and then they forget about
They
it.
care for 24 hours for the news cycle.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of Target. There's one near my house, and I do shop there almost every week. When the breach came on, I was like, man, maybe I'll not go this weekend.
All right,
But
guys.
I was back there a month.
I'll ask you a question. What was the last article? Marriott Breach was last month, right? A month ago, 30 days ago today. When was the last article written about the Marriott Breach? Guess the date. December 13th. From December 13th to December 28th, there has not been one article, one news story written about the Marriott Breach. The news cycle on it was exactly 2 weeks. And that was the largest breach in the world. In the world. In the world. It didn't just impact Americans. It impacted Malaysians, Europeans,
Everyone.
Mediterraneans,
Everyone, yeah.
Africans, South Americans, Australians. I mean,
The GDPR fine is going to be fun, right?
well, their CFO said it's going to cost them like $1 billion between like fines and remediation costs. And they don't have $1 billion insurance policy. That's crazy.
Yeah. And Brazil is coming out with something like a GDPR. California is, Chile, Argentina.
There's been 2 new Democratic senators. There's an actual, I read it last night. There was 15 Democrats in Congress that are trying to pass a privacy law similar to GDPR. And then there's another guy who wants to put CEOs in jail if they're breached. I don't think that one's going to make it anywhere. Yeah, I'm dead serious. He's very, very left-wing Democrat.
Wouldn't it be nice if that's a law that says instead of putting the CEO in jail, you need to have a CISO reporting to the CEO?
I don't think you can make that a law. I think that's going to end up having to be like something that NIST and like the CISO executive network and all these different bodies that have some influence, like the NTSC and others, that start delivering that message to the chief executive officers. I think that has to come from industry. I don't think it can come. If it comes from Washington, I don't think it should come from Washington. I think it needs to come from industry. I think it's people like you who are driving that conversation, and it's your peers. And it's the people who you talk to who, you guys start drafting articles and papers stating business cases, publishing them and putting them in front of board of directors and CEOs and driving that conversation. It's a slower process. But if you already have 1 or 2 successful cases, then let's highlight those cases. And let's make those the headlight of how has it streamlined the company. Because I think every company is waiting for someone else to do it before they do it, because they don't want to be Booz Allen did it because it's Booz Allen.
It's defense. Yeah.
It's defense.
Yep.
And security is a big part of their business. They're big in security because they now have $1 billion worth of U.S. government contracts for security. So yeah, the CISO needs to report to the CEO because that's now $1 billion worth of revenue for him. Right? But what other company is going to have $1 billion worth of security revenue? That's not a security company.
Right. And you could argue that for SMBs who don't have even $100,000 budget for security, right? If you're lucky to hire a CISO, why would you put a CISO down in the reporting structure? Knowing that the CISO may stay for 2 to 3 years and bolt. You want to capitalize that 2-3 years as much as you can to do all the things that you need to do.
I think when you look at most CEOs, and I'm not dismissing a CEO's intelligence level because they're there for a reason, their concern is revenue. Revenue, product, brand, business development, merger and acquisitions, legal issues, reporting to the board and stockholders, and security doesn't rank on that list.
That's not true. If you speak to some CEOs and they tell me that in their world, top 3 risks right now, cybersecurity is in the top 3. Why
Now.
is that?
Because
Why
it's
is
in the news.
that? Right. No, it's not only because it's in the news. It affects your bottom line. It affects it's millions of dollars.
Billions in some cases.
Right. So CEOs do not want to lose that millions of dollars that they could use to do M&A and build the company and grow the company. You lose that opportunity. Cybersecurity becomes a business opportunity loss.
You're right. I think when the point that I'm just trying to make is that even though security might be a concern for them, they more or less want to pass that off to the CIO or CTO.
Yes, that's the part where it's kind of disconnect. They
But-
know it's a huge risk.
Right, but they don't understand it. Like,
Right.
and let's be honest, you and I roll in some of the same circles. Some CISOs can't have a normal business conversation with a CEO. They're talking about very technical jargon with a CEO rather than talking a language a CEO could understand.
Right.
We need to invest $550,000 to do this, but if we do this, then it's going to drive the business to be able to do all these different things, which allows us to eventually, within 2 to 3 years, be much more prepared operationally from a security standpoint. So if you have that kind of conversation with a CEO is more likely going to go and do that. And you're starting to see that rise, I think, of people like yourself and Near and others who are, I like to call them the newer faces of the new faces of CISOs who are business drivers who understand the business piece of it. Because you don't come from security, you're a CPA. You understand numbers. And because you understand numbers and you understand security, you're able to connect the two and go to your CEO and be like, here's what we're investing, but here's what it means for the business. And here's why this is a good investment.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, I write reports for the board of directors. I write reports for the audit committee, and I know what the language they're used to. I know how they communicate with the board members. And, you're right. Security just need to do better at that job of communicating risk and how to get the budget to do what they need.
I think CISOs need to understand that they're in the sales business.
They are in the sales business. They're business enablers.
Yep. And you got to sell to everyone there. You got to be constantly selling. You got to sell your infrastructure team, your network team, your everyone. You've got to be selling all day long as a CISO.
When a business leader comes to me and says, hey, we want to go buy this cloud application, I will say, all right, let me talk to them. Let me look at their security. And I said, yep, you can do it, but I need to do all this to secure you better. I will never say no to the business leaders.
No.
Because their job is to grow the business.
Right.
And I'm there to help them.
You're there to be the security piece of it rather than be the no man.
Yeah.
Kind of want to wrap this up, but I had one final question for you. It's a buzzword. You ready for it?
Sure.
AI.
Yeah.
It's such a big buzzword, right? I mean, everywhere I go, I hear AI, AI. Our product is AI, and our AI is so smart. Alex, our AI is really smart. What's the future of AI in cybersecurity?
Well, there is a future of AI in cybersecurity. In fact, I'm familiar with 2 products in AI. Some call it machine learning. So supervised machine learning like Silence and unsupervised machine learning like Darktrace. So they have a role in cybersecurity in a sense like if you don't have the talent or the skill set, these are plug and play devices.
Right.
Darktrace, you buy them, you buy the plans, you plug it to your network, leave it for 2 weeks, come back, and boom, 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 it shoots all the alert. No configuration required. It's AI. Even the vendor can't even explain to you what it does because it's AI, it's IP, and they can speak to it. But it does what it's supposed to do in a very short manner with least amount of consultants to help to implement it, and it works. And I think there is a future. And as you see more threats coming on, AI is just going to play a more role. So on the AI offense side, the trend is already there. It's going to happen. So if you don't have AI defense, AI offense is going to make you have AI defense. And, for example of AI offense is like, hey, if you have a malware that doesn't need, once they penetrate your endpoints, once they're on the network, what if this malware has AI capabilities that don't need to talk to command and control servers for the next move? a lot of security SOC operation centers based on command and control blocking. Can you imagine the state of cybersecurity when that goes away? That a malware doesn't need that anymore. They could navigate, they could do their own research, and based on that data, move to whatever that their target is without a command and control. That's scary, and you need AI to defend that kind of malware. And I think there's some white papers out there. I think Darktrace has a white paper on that kind of malware. You talk.
Hey, Darktrace, you're getting a lot of press here, and if you want to sponsor the show, we're accepting sponsors right now.
I mean, you look at micro targeting as well. I mean, the case study is Harley Davidson. They increased their sales by 3,000% using AI because now they target consumers that want to buy Harley Davidson. Reverse that to a threat actor. Now I can micro target users that I want to target, not just basic normal users using AI.
Do you believe in user behavior analytics in cyber?
Sure, I do.
You think that's a byproduct of AI, or you think that's a standalone product?
Well, user behavior analysis product like Exabeam does. I don't think they tout it as AI. In fact, I'm not sure even they say it's machine learning.
They don't. None of them do.
Yeah.
Which I find very confusing, because to me that's like the ultimate place where you want to have AI and machine learning, because that's how you sniff out anomalies. That's how you start to understand behavior. But also it's a business driver. If you're able to understand your user behavior analytics for a security standpoint, think what you could do with that kind of data on a business standpoint.
But here's the downside of AI, though. I mean, you all talk about next-gen AV that's machine learning. Well, my peers in Asia has told me that, hey, they have next-gen AV. Guess what? Ransomware bypass it. A variant of ransomware bypass it. So there's nothing that's 100% proof, even in AI, right?
Well, it's not like you can't secure anything 100%.
Right.
You can't even secure your home 100%, Alex.
Well, in that example is that it's an SMB,
right?
Has no defense in depth security. They managed to get onto the network through RDP, and once you're on the network, you have AI next-gen AV. If I can run 1,000 variants on ransomware, I'm going to find the 10% that will bypass you, right? So AI is not the solution. You still need defense in depth, but AI is definitely part of the solution.
It is. Thanks for coming and joining us in the studio, man. This was a lot of fun.
I did enjoy it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. And so Alex is a big fan, so I'm going to make sure that I give you another shout out at the very end so he knows to listen to the whole thing. He'll probably laugh as he hears this. Alex Tan in the studio with us today. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. So it's been a lot of fun, Alex. Make cyber great again. You are wearing the blue FBI hat. It is the blue FBI hat. It's what it is. Had you worn the black one? What was the black one? No, this was Navy, right?
No,
this was Navy.
Black
was FBI, right? Yeah. This was the Navy team.
The red was the company?
No, the red was the White House and white was the company. Yeah.
Nice cap.
Yeah. The red ones were gone. Like, we couldn't keep red ones at all. Like, whenever we get red ones in, we sell out in just a matter of minutes. Like, they just don't stick around. You can buy those hats off our website at CyberHubEngage.com, at our shop. And with that being said, thanks for listening. You can obviously tune in, subscribe on our YouTube channel below. Make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for some of the behind the scenes and some of the stuff that Micah and his team work on, kind of behind the scenes, to make this podcast really what it is. So, Alex, thanks for being with us again. Thanks to Micah Smith, who's our technical director of the show. I'm James Cesar, your host, and you're listening to the CyberHub Engage podcast.